I'm standing in the middle of her expensive-looking ballroom. The smell of lilies is so thick I can taste it, and my sister, my own blood, Sarah, is smiling at me while she hands a manila envelope to my boss, who just happened to be on the guest list. She didn't even blink. She just leaned in and whispered loud enough for the whole table to hear that maybe I wasn't as loyal to the company as I seemed. The air just left my lungs. Honestly, it felt like being punched by a ghost, someone you thought was behind you but was actually just waiting for the right moment to shove you off the cliff. I looked at her fiancé, Mark, and he was just staring at his shoes like he already knew the script. It's funny how the mind works in those moments. I wasn't even thinking about my mortgage or my career anymore. I was just looking at the way her diamond ring caught the light while she systematically dismantled my life in front of 100 people. She had this look, this tiny, sharp glint in her eyes that said I finally win, and the room started spinning. The music felt like it was underwater. Thump, 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 and I realized this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She'd been planning this engagement party for 3 months just so she could have the perfect stage to burn me down. I looked at my boss. His name is David, and his face went from confused to disappointed in about 4 seconds. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. He just tucked that envelope under his arm like it was a death warrant. Sarah reached out and patted my arm, telling me it was for my own good, that the truth always comes out, and I felt this cold, dark tide rising up from my stomach. I remember the silence. It wasn't actually quiet in the room. People were laughing and clinking glasses, but in my head, it was absolute silence, the kind you hear right before a car crash. I walked toward the bathroom just to breathe, but I stopped at the bar instead. My hands were shaking so bad the ice in my glass was rattling like a warning bell. I thought about all the times I bailed her out, the money I lent her, the secrets I kept for her, the way I stayed up all night when she was sick, and it all felt like ash in my mouth. She wanted to talk about the truth? Fine, let's talk about the truth. Because I had a folder on my phone that would make her little envelope look like a greeting card. I didn't leave. I didn't run away and cry in my car like she expected. I just sat there, watching her dance. Watching her pretend to be the perfect bride-to-be, while the career I spent 10 years building was bleeding out on the floor. The betrayal wasn't just that she lied, it was that she enjoyed it. I saw her laugh at something Mark said, and I felt the last bit of sisterly love just snap. Like a dry twig under a boot. I opened my phone, my thumb hovering over the send to all button for the party's digital photo slideshow, the one everyone was watching on the big screens, and I realized I wasn't the victim anymore. I was just the person holding the matches. The thing about Sarah is she always thinks she's the smartest person in the room, but she forgets that I'm the one who handled the finances for our dad's estate. She forgets that I'm the one who has the passwords to the old cloud drive we shared back in college. I walked over to the tech guy, a kid named Liam who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and I told him I had a tribute video for the happy couple. A little surprise, he didn't even check the file. He just plugged it in. I saw Sarah look up at the screen, her glass of champagne halfway to her lips. She was expecting a montage of her childhood photos, the cute ones where she's wearing a tutu or the ones where she's winning a trophy, but then the first image popped up, and it wasn't her. It was a bank statement, an old one, followed by a series of wire transfers that Sarah thought she'd hidden 3 years ago. The room went quiet, and I mean deathly quiet. People stopped chewing. David, my boss, was suddenly very interested in the screen, his eyes darting between the numbers on the wall and the envelope Sarah had given him, because those numbers showed exactly where the missing funds from our family business had gone. The funds she had tried to frame me for stealing just 10 minutes ago. The screen flashed to a legal document, a signature that wasn't mine, but looked a whole lot like hers. The power didn't just shift, it evaporated from her. She went from the queen of the ballroom to a cornered animal in the time it takes to blink. I stood by the buffet table, just watching her face turn this sickly shade of gray. Mark, her fiancé, stood up and walked closer to the screen, his forehead all wrinkled like he was Trying to solve a puzzle that he really didn't want the answer to. Sarah started screaming at the tech guy to turn it off, but I'd told him it was a looping file. He couldn't find the stop button fast enough, and then the big one hit. A photo of Sarah in a hotel lobby with Mark's best friend, taken just last week. She tried to run toward me, her heels clicking frantically on the marble, but she tripped on the train of her own dress. It was pathetic, honestly. I didn't feel happy. I just felt heavy. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, whispering that I was ruining her life, that I was a monster, but I just leaned in and told her that she was the one who wanted the truth to come out. I told her I'd already sent the full digital file to our family lawyer and the police about 10 minutes ago. The look of pure, unadulterated terror in her eyes was the most honest thing I'd seen from her in years. I watched Mark take his engagement ring back. He didn't even say a word, he just slid it off her finger and walked out the front door. Sarah was left standing there, in her white dress, under the bright lights, with everyone she'd ever wanted to impress staring at her like she was something they'd found on the bottom of their shoe. My boss walked over to me, handed me back the envelope she'd given him without even opening it, and he just nodded once. He didn't apologize, and I didn't ask him to. I just felt the weight of the world shift. I wasn't the one who was fired, she was the one who was finished. The party didn't end with a bang. It just sort of deflated. People started trickling out, leaving their half-eaten cake and their expensive gifts behind like they were contaminated. I stayed until the very end, mostly because I didn't have the energy to move my legs. I watched the janitors start to sweep up the rose petals and the broken glass. Sarah was sitting on the floor in the middle of the ballroom, her dress all wrinkled and stained with something, maybe wine, maybe just dirt. She wasn't even crying anymore. She was just staring at the empty screen like she expected it to apologize to her. I walked over to her, not to gloat, not to say I told you so. I just wanted to see if I felt anything left for her. I stood there for a long time, just looking down at the top of her head, and all I could think about was how we used to share a bunk bed and how she used to be afraid of the dark. It's weird how you can hate someone and still remember how small they used to be. She didn't look up. She just whispered that she hated me, that she'd always hated me. And I realized that there was no way back from this, no apology that would fix it, no amount of time that would bridge the gap she'd spent years digging. I left her there, alone in that big, cold room with the smell of dying flowers. I walked out into the cool night air and the silence of the parking lot felt like a heavy blanket. I got into my car and I didn't start the engine for 20 minutes. I just sat there, looking at my hands in the dim light of the street lamp. My career was safe, I guess, but I felt like I'd lost something much bigger than a job. I'd lost the idea of having a sister, the idea of having a family that actually cared. I started the car and drove home. The streets were empty, and the world looked different, darker, somehow more honest. When I got home, I deleted her number. I deleted all the photos. I even threw away the old childhood picture I kept in my wallet. I sat on my kitchen floor and finally cried, not because of what she did to me, but because of what we did to each other, because the revenge didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like the end of a long, exhausting war where everyone lost. The house was quiet, the air was still, and I realized I was finally alone, completely, utterly alone, and for the first time in my life, that was exactly what I needed to be.